Hello, hi, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to a new series on this channel. In this installment, we are going to be reading every book on my physical TBR. This was highly inspired by Ellen Catherine here on BookTube, so big shout out to Ellen for the inspo. So I made a spread in my reading journal, and this is my unread library. So these are all the books that I have not read that I own. In this list here, we have all these here, plus one more book here. Counting all of these, we have 63 books on this list, but I have finished one, which is Legendary. And so now we are down to 62 unread books that I own. At first, I didn't think I had that many books because when I did my TBR jar prompt picks my February reads video, it didn't look like I had that many books. And I believe I had shown all the books that I own in that video. Seeing it on paper, it actually looks like a lot. Maybe because a lot of them are series. So I want to dwindle this down to a manageable amount. I would say maybe 10 books. Is that too ambitious? Let's say our manageable amount is going to be 10 books on my unread books that I own. And also I do have a Dutch door going on here. I have a lot of space down here, so I'm gonna make sure that I'm not going to fill this completely. I'm not gonna put that on me. I do foresee myself buying more books this year, so that's why I wanted to add another 2 pages, but I know I'm not going to fill this out. I'm also not going to be on a book buying ban as well because I find that nowadays that I'm pretty good at selecting what books I want on my shelves, and so I don't really have that urge to buy a lot of books. However, I do have a wish list of books that I do want, so that's why I have made more here so that I can fill it out, but of course maybe fill out like maybe up to here. Maybe we're still in February. Who knows what's going to happen. So in this video, I do want to complete 2 books, which is also quite ambitious for me because I tend to read 1 book or 3 books a month. So as we saw last month in January, I have completed 3 books. So to finish 2 books in 1 video, all in the month of February, it's quite ambitious, but we're going to do it. Let's pick our first book that we're going to read in this video. So the first book I want to pick is going to be from my February TBR. Clearly, I did not read any of my books from my February TBR, but we are also at the start of February right now. It's time to start reading my February TBR. Out of these 3 books, I am eyeing Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. Because first of all, it would be a gratifying win to finish a book so early on, even though it's a novella. This is going to be motivation to complete the 2 books that I want to finish. We'll start with Thornhedge. I've already read the synopsis in one of my previous videos, so I won't read it again. And I tend to go into books blind. However, I've been reading synopses in my video so that we can all dive into a book together. So if I were to read a synopsis of a book, I would read it once and I would not read it again before going into the book. That's what we're gonna do with Thornhedge. We're going to start this after work, and I will hop on to give you any reading updates, or maybe I'll finish this book by then. This only has 111 pages, so if I finish the book by then, I'll give you my thoughts. Hi, so let's do a belated check-in to Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. Now, before I start, it's been a week since I last checked in for my reading updates, but honestly, I barely picked up this book. So currently I am on page 72 out of 111. That's 39 pages left to finishing this book. So first things first, when I first started this book, the story wasn't really captivating to me. I wasn't really invested in the story, and so that's why I wasn't really picking up this book. So now that I am more than halfway through the book, I am enjoying it now. But at the same time, I just see myself not picking this up and finishing this book. However, I am determined to do that today because we have another book that we need to get through in this video. I am determined to finishing this book today so that we can start on our new book tomorrow. And I do want to finish reading that book before this video goes up. And so I have less than 6 days to finish. So we'll see how that goes. But let's get back to Thornhedge. I'm not too sure if I really understood this book, but I think it's a bit more clearer now. We are following our main protagonist, Toadling, and she can transform from being a human and a toad, hence the cover of the book. This is a Sleeping Beauty retelling. However, we are not really following the princess that is pretty much under this curse to be sleeping until maybe a prince arrives and maybe grants her a kiss to wake her up. This is actually following a toad, and it seems to me that this toad wants to keep this princess sleeping eternally. In comes our second main protagonist. I believe he's the second main protagonist, and he is the knight named Halem, who's going to lift this curse from this princess or this toad. This kind of has a dual timeline where it's not per chapter that we jump back and forth from present day to the past, but rather that it is in the chapters, within the paragraphs. So sometimes we are reading the present day where we see Toadling and the knight going into this tower, and we are also seeing flashbacks of Toadling and the events that leads to present day, essentially. At first, I wasn't really invested in this story, and I felt like I was going in and out of the story, and I caught myself rereading paragraphs or chapters because it didn't really click in my mind, and I didn't even know what I was reading because I was just zoning out most of the time. But now that I am more than halfway through this book, I'm starting to get interested into the story. I am more curious as to what's going to happen. So let's continue reading, and I'll check in with you all when I either finish this book or have another reading update. Good morning, it's the next day, and last night I finished Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. Now, yesterday I was debating on whether I should give this a 3 stars or a 3.5 stars. After thinking about it and writing up my thoughts on this book, I am going to give this a 3.5 stars. Now, first off, some great things about this book is that I love a dark reimagining of this fairy tale retelling. I do like how it's more on the darker side of a retelling, and that is what drew me into this book in the first place. However, I would say for the first 65% of the book, I struggled trying to get engaged in the story. I don't know why. I couldn't really focus in reading, and I slowly started seeing myself not picking up this book. And although it's only 111 pages, it just took me a whole week to finish. So that took way too long. That's why it's also not going to be a 4 stars and above, because I thought, since this is a short book and I do like fairy tale retellings, I thought this is going to go pretty smoothly and pretty fast, pretty quick. And I thought I would finish this in a day or two, but it took me a whole week because I just wasn't gravitating towards picking this book up every time I had some downtime. I instead indulged in my other hobbies. And the reason why I wouldn't give it a 3 stars is because after the 65% mark, I started getting more engaged into the book. I would say maybe a bit too late, but I mean, better late than never. And after reading the acknowledgements, I appreciated the book more. That's where the extra 0.5 star came in. And a 3.5 stars isn't bad at all. That's like a 70%. So we follow Toadling, and she was born human. She was stolen from her parents by the fairies and switched with a changeling. Apparently in the fairy world, they like to make these little pranks where when a child is born, they like to switch it with a changeling. I think a changeling is more dangerous and monstrous. So she was switched at birth, but she was raised well in the waters of the fairy world. And one day she gets asked to go back to her world and back to her family to pretty much put a curse on this changeling. And this changeling is going to be our princess in distress. There is a knight who comes in to try to save this distressed princess. This is classified as a horror, cozy fantasy. And I mean, I see some of the descriptions of toddling where if she were to cry, she cries black tears. And when she laughs, sometimes her toad form comes in. And so she croaks when she laughs. So stuff like that. It's more, I don't want to say grotesque, but I guess this is what she's trying to portray. So that is Thornhedge, and we are finished with our first book on our physical TBR takedown. So the next book I want to read, this book I have been eyeing for quite some time, and it's not going to be on my February TBR, but it's actually on my winter TBR. And after going through that video of my winter TBR, I realized I read nothing from my winter TBR. The book that we are going to read from my winter TBR is going to be The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I heard tremendous things about this, and also my best friend has read this, and currently my eldest sister is reading this. I believe by now she's probably done the book. So it's time for me to start on The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. At the beginning of the year, my best friend and I went on a trip, and she brought along this book to read, and someone came up to her to say that this book was really good and that she's going to love it. I'm very excited about this. I feel like I'm going to love this book. So I've read the synopsis a couple of months ago, I would say, and I do want to go into this without reading the back of the book again. So I will come back when I have a reading update. Good morning. Here is a quick reading update for The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I am at the halfway point, I believe. I am at 196, so just a little bit over halfway, or pretty much halfway. And I am loving this book so far. I'm really enjoying it. When I first started, I thought it was a bit slow because, I mean, they are setting up the story. We are meeting Evelyn Hugo and Monique Grant, who is interviewing Evelyn Hugo, and they are going to be writing a book together. Initially, they didn't meet because of that. At least Monique thought that she was interviewing Evelyn Hugo for her most recent donation of auctioning her, not donation, but auctioning her gowns. But it turns out that Evelyn wanted Monique for a specific reason, and that is to write a biography of Evelyn Hugo's life. If you haven't already guessed, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo has 7 husbands. So we are on husband 4, and honestly, this is reading so quickly now. I stayed up quite late to read this, and I just didn't want to put it down. I just knew I had to go to sleep. And I didn't feel sleepy at all, which is quite shocking because I tend to fall asleep in bed while reading in the dark with my book light on. I would tend to start dozing off when I'm in that comfy state. I'm pretty happy that I got through halfway through the book, and hopefully I can finish the other half today so that I could edit this video tomorrow to be up on Sunday. So we'll see how that goes. So far, I'm really enjoying this. So we are just going through her life. It was so heartbreaking to read this one part. It was about her and one of her lovers. I'm not going to say who. If you've already read this book, you already know who. But she goes through this breakup, I would say, with one of her lovers, and just reading it was just so sad. And knowing that this lover has passed on, and knowing that her lovers, all her lovers, passed on and she's the only one alive. I want this to be spoiler free, so I hope you know what I'm talking about. It's pretty much before she meets her 4th husband. So should I be giving names? I don't even know. So I'm not gonna give names. I am excited to get back into this book, but it is already 8:40, so can't really read right now. So we will continue reading at night and hopefully finish it by today. And if not, tomorrow morning, which is Saturday. So I will check in with you all when I have another reading update. Hi! It's another day, of course. I feel like I only film in the mornings, but it is the weekend and I have a reading update. I have less than 100 pages left to finishing this book, and although I really want to just finish the last 100 pages on the couch, I really need to clean this condo. So we are going to finish the last 100 pages through audiobook. So I wanted to hop in to share my thoughts so far in this book. So after meeting the love of her life, I felt that it started getting interesting. The two husbands prior was kind of slow for me. And so now that I'm at the last 100 page mark, I have some thoughts. At this point, Evelyn has everything working out for her. She has all the people that she loves close to her. She is living the life. But then, of course, something has to happen. There were some frustrating moments in the book, but not in the sense that it didn't make me enjoy the book. It's a good frustration rather than frustrated because the writing wasn't good or the story has too many plot holes, etc. Not only do we get a deep dive into Evelyn's life, there was something that was going to affect Monique. So I'm very curious to get to that point, and I'm very curious as to why Evelyn has specifically asked Monique to write her biography. I accidentally saw a little spoiler when I was looking up the audiobook. To keep this vlog spoiler free, I would say it's the second last chapter. But if you have seen the Spotify layout of how the chapters go, they kind of section it off as husbands or a milestone in the book, I would say. But I'm still curious as to why Evelyn handpicked Monique to write her biography. Since I have to clean up the condo, I will listen to the last 100 pages through audiobook, and I will check in with you all once I finish this book or have another update somehow in between the last 100 pages of this book. It is the evening and I have finished The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo this afternoon while cleaning up the condo. Let's talk about it. I really enjoyed this book. I'm going to give this one a 4.75 stars. I didn't really get that 5-star feeling from this book, but I have been debating on whether I should give this one a 5 stars or not. Because I didn't have that initial 5-star feeling from this book, I'm going to give it a 4.75 stars. So at the last 100 page mark, it was just so sad. Just seeing Evelyn lose the love of her life, and her daughter in this book was just so sad. I don't even remember. It was like a fever dream. I paused the audio every time a sad scene came up because I was like crying, which is great because in my book bingo, I can cross that off. I felt that in the beginning of this book, it was a bit slow for me and it took me a while to get into the story. I think by husband 2, I started getting intrigued and engaged in the story because we meet Evelyn's love of her life. I felt like there were a lot of sad moments and frustrating moments, but in the best possible way. Just the decisions that Evelyn makes just doesn't make, it was just quite frustrating. I'm glad that Evelyn got to be with the love of her life at some point in her life. That was sweet and at the same time heartbreaking. I hope you know what I mean if you've read this book. I feel like majority of the people have read this book here on BookTube, and I'm probably one of the last few that haven't read this book until now. Out of all the husbands that Evelyn had been with, I really didn't care for any of them except for one of them. I felt like that was the peak moment in her life until she made the wrong decision again. Because of her actions, this is what happens. The way the book ended was quite satisfying. I felt like how Evelyn went through her life, she maintained her persona. Like, that's just Evelyn Hugo. She didn't let anything stop her from getting what she wanted, and also she decided her fate. Now, I can't help but compare this to A Great Big Beautiful Life. I can see the differences in here. First off, this title states that we are going to be looking at the 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and we know that Evelyn Hugo is a reclusive Hollywood icon. When we go into Evelyn Hugo's story, between Monique interviewing Evelyn and us getting a deep dive into Evelyn's story, it was very seamless and I felt like it flowed pretty naturally. And we didn't really get to see too much of Monique's backstory and her life, which is what I wanted. Well, based on the title of this book, we are just getting a deep dive into Evelyn Hugo's life. That might be why I enjoyed The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo over Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. Although that one, it didn't really specify that we are following a once tabloid princess, and she decided to tell her story. Between the competition of our two main characters trying to write the story of this once tabloid princess who fell off the radar, and the actual deep dive into her story, it didn't flow as naturally as I would liked it, and I felt quite bored in her story. Whereas for Evelyn Hugo, there was just so much going on, and how Taylor Jenkins Reid tries to do subtle foreshadowing throughout the chapters to try to keep the readers engaged is what I liked most about this book compared to A Great Big Beautiful Life. For example, we had a little foreshadowing of Evelyn's living the life right now. However, things are gonna change for her because she made the wrong decision. Of course, Taylor Jenkins Reid did a way better job than me when describing that part or scene. So that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I really enjoyed this, and although it's not a 5-star read, I love this so much. And that wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoy doing this series, and I definitely foresee myself doing this more in the future. I feel like this is really going to help me take down some books on my physical TBR. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!